goes. Hello everybody, how you doing? It's great to be here. Welcome back to the Scale Up Leader. Today we're having a webinar on silo busting. And I hope I hope there's a few people watching. We've had a few people sign up. Usually there's some more people who join as we go through. So if you're here, drop a line, say hello. I'd love to hear from you. And specifically, what I'm going to do right now, let me share my screen, because that's the thing that I'm supposed to be doing here. Share screen, window, this one here, share that screen there, and there it is. Okay, we're talking about silo busting, and it's not just a big company problem. So we've got a bit to talk about here, but first of all, can you hear me? I really want to hear if you can hear me. I've had a lot of trouble with sound, and I'd really like to know, can you actually hear me? If you can hear me, drop a thumbs up. I'm just going to turn my speaker off so I don't get any echo here. Can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me, and comment if there's a problem. I would really like to know. So while you're doing that, I'm just going to open up my, oops, that's not what I want us to do. Where's my, there it is. Oops, there we go. Right. So while you're doing that, I'm just going to pull up my own LinkedIn and just see. People might be on LinkedIn. They might be on Zoom, YouTube, or various other places. I'm keen to hear where you are. Hear whether you can hear me or not. If you can't, I'm just going to check myself anyway to make sure that I can. It looks like you can hear me. Okay, looks like you can hear me. Every now and again, what is this? StreamYard doesn't let me share the screen properly, doesn't let me do this thing properly. So okay, let's assume you can hear me. If you can hear me, drop a note in the comments anytime you're watching this. Drop a note in the comments. Where are you based? Where are you watching from? I'd love to know where people are, just physically, which city you're in, that kind of thing. My background, I'm from Adelaide in Australia. You may hear from the accent. I spent 10 years in London. I worked for Google for 6 years in London, which is where I discovered OKRs and a bunch of other things about scale-ups. And I now live in Luxembourg. I've been here for 9 years. I worked for Amazon for 2 years. Learned a huge amount about management from Amazon. It was a wonderful learning experience. Discovered though that I was a square peg in a round hole. I'm just going to move this chair. Discovered that I was a square peg in a round hole, and so left Amazon after about 2 years and became a consultant. And I've been working mostly since then with scale-ups, helping them with OKRs and strategy and things like that. Now, if you have a question, please drop it in the comments. Just drop it in there. If it's a short question, if it's something I can easily answer, I will answer it as we go, especially if it's clarification. If it's not, then if it's something longer, I'll answer it at the end. Okay, so let's see how we're doing here. So let's start off with what are silos? What are silos? Now, silos are storage towers for grain. We're not going to talk about this kind of silo, but I want to give you the background. Storage towers for grain. They can unload and load independently. So each one of those columns, you can load the grain into there, and you can take the grain out. So you can load up the first one, load up the second one, load up the third one, and then unload the first one into a truck or a train or whatever it is, unload the second one, and so on. Oops. And what it means is that the grain doesn't move between silos. So old grain doesn't contaminate new grain, all that sort of stuff. And it's great for grain management. It means that you can organize your grain really well, and you can keep it a long time. You can store it. When you've got a big train, you can bring truckloads of grain to this, and then big train and take it out. And you can decorate it with artwork, which is cool. So that's what silos are. In a business context, silos in business is basically like this. Now, first of all, we start out with its separate functions or teams. Now, that's not silos on its own. That's just normal organizational structures. You normally have functions or teams or something that are separated. But what makes them silos is that they operate independently. They're a bit like the silos that we have for grain. A bit like the silos we have for grain. They operate independently, and information doesn't move between the silos. So they're terrible for business management. If you have this situation, we'll talk about what's the pain point here in a minute. And you can't decorate them with artwork, so they don't even have that going for them. Now, is this a big company problem? This is something that often comes up. And in fact, that was my assumption when I first started working with Scalups. I thought, well, silos are only something that happens in big companies. And one of the reasons I like working with startups is because they don't have silos, because no one likes silos. But the thing is, actually, well, first of all, if you're online, drop me a line in the comment. Just say how many people your company has, how many employees you have. I'd love to know how many employees you have. just so we can see who's listening, and help make sure we're applying this to the right group. I'll customize what I'm saying to you. So drop that in the comments. But my experience is that silos start when functions are created, usually between 50 and 200 people. That's where you start to create functional teams, sometimes smaller than that even, but especially when you get to that, it's not just a manager and a team. It's like there's an extra layer, and there's a functional group here, and that kind of thing. And now we have the problem of how do we work across them. And the thing is that it happens by default. So silos are not some sort of failure mode that's unique, or that sort of like requires you to hire bad people, or happens when you hire bad people, or anything like that. It happens by default. You'll find that if in any organization, as you're doing this, as you're setting up your organization and it's growing, things start to go just like this, and they tend to work. They tend to have so they tend to have you tend to develop silos by default, unless you're doing something consciously to make sure that you're not having that problem, right? Okay, so what's the problem with silos? What's going on here? Well, let's talk about what the problem is. The problem is that sales is doing one thing. They're doing enterprise deals, for example. Marketing is doing another thing. They're focused on marketing the amazing service that you get. Operations is trying to lower costs, which means that operations and marketing are having a big fight, because lower costs and amazing service don't always go together. And product and engineering are off doing a marketplace. Now, this is a little bit extreme for the sake of making a point, for the sake of illustration, but you get the point here. I hope you get the point. I'd love, if you don't, I'd love to hear it. Where is my? I have something else on my screen, but it's not there. I don't know where it is. Maybe I can get it from over here. Boom. There it is. That's what I'm looking for. Okay, cool. So now I can also see what I'm doing, which is really helpful. That's actually what I want. So basically, this whole thing, this is what happens, and this is a bit extreme. The example that I've given you here is a little bit extreme. Realistically, things are more subtle in most organizations than this. It's not always that as obvious as this, right? But it is the same problem. What happens in the ideal state here, what you really want to get to, is everyone's going in the same direction. So there's less conflict, happier people, and results compound. And what you want to do is get everyone on, for example, the self-service rocket, if that's what you're trying to do. So all these teams are trying to do the same things. We're all focused on developing self-service and moving our customers to self-service. Now, if that's not what you're trying to do in your business, that's fine. You don't have to be developing self-service, but whatever you're doing, you want people focused on that same thing, right? And when you do this, it's not just that you have all these arrows, all this effort going in the same direction, and they add together. They compound. I mean, partly because there's less conflict and happier people, so people are doing more things anyway, but all of the efforts that you put into this, all of the efforts compound on top of one another. So the effort that product and engineering put into making a self-service product is easy. It makes it easier for operations to work and manage that product and service the customers, right? But also what they're doing is helping product do it, because they're saying, well, here's the process that we use, so here's how you can learn how to make this self-service. And all that sort of stuff. Marketing is marketing the self-serviceness. They're not marketing high-touch support, for example. They're also marketing towards the right people who need self-service, usually lower down the size segmentation, right? And sales, of course, is working on how do we acquire and onboard self-service customers. So this is the ideal state. This is what you want to get to, and this is actually what's going wrong when you don't have when you have silos. And if you think about our favorite guru, Steve Jobs, he says focus is about saying no. So if you think about focus, right, this whole concept of focus, if you've got a silo, you're not focused. Like it doesn't matter how focused you feel or how focused you want to say you are, or what you're trying to do in terms of like what your conscious strategy is. If there are silos, there won't be focus in practice. And so your strategy will fail. Now, oops, I've got the wrong way. Do you have silos? How do you diagnose whether you have silos? Well, one of the ways is to have a look at these symptoms. Do you have missed dependencies? Do you have conflict and tension? Do you have misaligned priorities? Negative surprises? That means like negative surprises means like we're doing something, we think it's all going to work, and then suddenly we have a surprise that it's not going to work. And this is usually because we have some conflict between teams or groups who don't realize that they're doing things that are not conflicting or that are not complementing each other or that kind of thing, right? Is there a lack of focus? Is there low trust between teams? Do you have to do a lot of rework, right? This is the kind of stuff where you've done something, someone else has done something to help you launch the product, but it turns out that actually something about one of these things doesn't work with the other one, and so you have to redo that thing, or the expectation of the product is not as we hoped for our customers. Oops. Now, there are other potential causes for all of this, right? There are plenty of reasons why these things exist, but silos make these even worse. So if you have these and you have a lot of them and you have this situation happening a lot, it's quite likely because you have silos. But let's dig a bit deeper. Let's look at the root cause of silos. The root cause of silos is basically these relationships at the top, right? Because the silos are usually the functional teams or the groups. And what's happening is these relationships are amplified throughout the org. Through the organization, right? So the chief commercial officer has a sales team, the marketing officer has a marketing team, the operations officer has an operations team, technology officer has an engineering team, product officer has a product team, and the finance officer has a finance team, and HR or whatever else fits under there, right? So you've got these groups, and what's going on is these leaders, if they're good leaders, at least at that level, that functional level, they're creating a culture, they're creating a focus within their organization. And so those become the strongest relationships. People identify, like the chief marketing officer identifies my team as being the marketing team. And so what they do is they're focused downwards, and they're focused on what this team can do and how we can do this, right? What that means is that these leaders will fill any vacuums. So if there's a vacuum, for example, of an unclear strategy and you have this silo organization, then what happens is each of these leaders develops their own version of the strategy, and it becomes different. And now we have this situation where people are now looking across at each other, and from their perception, from each leader's perspective, all the others are wrong, right? So, or the others who have different perspective, different different strategy or variation on that strategy are wrong. And so that then creates low trust. It reinforces the silo situation, right? So this is what's usually happening when we have silos. This is the cause, the root cause of the silos. Now, how do I diagnose this when I go into a company? It's actually not too hard, right? What I do is I go and speak to all the executives, particularly the leaders, and I ask them what's working well and what's not working well. And the answers they give me, especially if they have silos, is, well, my team's working well. What we're doing is lined up reasonably well. Everyone's usually reasonably honest, and they have some issues, and they're open enough about their actual issues that they do have, and they'll say it's mostly working well. We've got this issue and that issue, but mostly it's working well. And then they'll say, and I'll ask them what's not working well, and they'll say other teams. And what's going on here? What's happening? Why is there other teams not working well? What's causing this problem, right? What's causing this problem is exactly this situation with this people having different views of what's happening here in these silos. And so from my perspective, we're doing all the right things because we wouldn't be doing the wrong things, because if we were doing the wrong things, I'd fix it, right? But it feels like those other teams are doing the wrong things, right? So we end up with this situation of a blame game, right? Where people are sort of blaming other people for this. Now, this happens even more lower down the organization. Usually at that top level, people are more mature, let's say, and more able to deal with this kind of situation. And they tend to be somewhat of a team. Like, they're not necessarily, when I have those silos, I'm not saying they're not a team. They just tend to be somewhat of a team. And so they know how to behave, right? But realistically, this blame game happens, and it happens even more down throughout the organization. And this team blames that team, and those people blame the other people. And it also is sort of sourced from how the top level work. Now, I'd love to know, again, in the comments, how big is this problem for your business? Do you put it at a scale of 1 to 10 in the comments? I'm not getting many people commenting on this, which is making me wonder whether it's actually working. If I have sound, I hope I do. But if you are on here, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I'd love to hear, is this actually happening? Can you hear this correctly? Let me just see if I've got some weird sound issue going on here. I hope I haven't. Do I have any? Is that sound working okay? I think it is, right? Okay, so we'll hope it is. So you drop a comment in there if you're having this problem, if you feel like this is happening in your organization. I'd love to know. But let's talk about solutions here. The solution here is really fundamentally, it's at a mindset shift, right? It's a mindset shift problem here. What we need to do is move our mindset from the team that you're in, from having your team, your individual team. Now I'm getting echo. Let's get rid of the echo. Boop. Right. So your individual team has all these your team below you is very important. That's something, right? But what we want to know is what's happening at the rest of this. So the team you're in is your first team. So as a leader here, that where I've put that where is it? This side, where I put that blue circle. No, this side, where I put that blue circle, that's your first team. And so what you want is for people to see that as their first team. Yes, their team below them is still important. Yes, there should be servant leaders. Yes, they should be looking after that team, and that's a very important thing to be doing. But their first team is the team they're in. And if you have this mindset of this is the team, it's the leadership team, we're cross-functional, we're running the business, so we're focused on the business. We're not running just a function. We as a team are running the business. That means that we start to have the right sort of mentality. And what can happen here is that you co-develop a strategy with this group here, and then that strategy becomes clear across the organization, across this group. And even more so, once you have this strategy and it's clear across the group, the act of doing so, the act of developing this strategy as a group, right, together, helps improve the strategy, and so it becomes better, and it makes sure it's consistent across there, and it makes sure that everyone is actually engaged in that strategy. Helps create a team. So this is like a sort of a chicken and egg scenario. You create the team, but by creating the strategies together, you also create the team, right? Now, how do you do this? And in order to understand how to do this, because doing this it's really nice to think about a mindset shift. That's a good thing to do. But the question to me is really, how do you do it? How do you actually make this happen? And I want to introduce this guy. He's a guy called R. Buckminster Fuller. He's famous for inventing weird atoms or molecules called buckyballs, which are those little pictures there. And they've got really interesting characteristics made of carbon. They're like carbon nanotubes. I was obsessed with this guy when I was in high school, I think it was. I just found all these cool molecules he thought, and I thought, oh, that's amazing. But he also said the most fantastic quote: if you want to teach people a new way of thinking, don't bother trying to teach them. Instead, give them a tool, the use of which will lead to new ways of thinking, right? So this is what I do. This is how I work. What I do is I take 3 tools that I do work on. There's a few others that I work on quite frequently as well, but these particular 3 tools I'm going to take you through today. 3 tools that I use to break down silos. They are objectives and key results, planning habit, and the operational link, or WBR. Now, we'll talk about these briefly. I obviously go into a lot more detail in my work with customers, in my training and things like that, but this should still be relevant and interesting. So let's go into a bit of detail with these. First of all, very briefly, what are OKRs? OKRs are basically have a consistent time constraint across multiple parts of the organization, define what you want to achieve, and your definition of success, right? How do you define success? How do we know we succeeded? So for example, in Q4, we will build our self-service model as measured by decrease the 7-day average inbound support requests from 658 to 120. That's a really concrete target. We know whether we achieve that or not. We can measure it. Increase the 7-day active users on customer support sites from 300 to 3,000, right? Again, we know whether we've achieved this or not. It's very clear. Reduce the number of onboarding steps from 23 to 7. Very clear. We know we've done this. This is something that, by the way, some of those things there are almost outputs, and some of these are inputs. This is a controllable input. This is something that we believe is going to help us get there. It's not the result of getting there, if that makes sense. So by doing this, we think we'll get to a self-service model. And acquire and launch our first no-touch customer. We just want 1 customer, right? So these might be the things you do. And this is oh, good. We've got somebody there. Hello. Someone's given a thumbs up. That's good. So this is what OKRs look like. And what you do is you put them into this format, and the format is basically in this quarter we will objective as measured by these key results, and that's really all OKRs are. There's lots of complicated rules out there. This is what it is to keep it simple, right? Now, when you write an OKR like this, the trick with this is to write it such that it's cross-functional. So if you think about all of this, what we're doing here, we're trying to move to self-service model. In order to move to self-service model, you do have to be cross-functional. You do have to use multiple functions to do it. And these particular OKRs, they may or may not be the best ones for you, but this is for an example, this is a good one. It's all about getting these cross-functional OKRs. Now, once you do that, the secret to this is that these objectives and key results create shared goals because they're cross-functional. That's the key. They're cross-functional goals. So because they're cross-functional, they create shared goals. That breaks down the silos. by having shared goals, you break down silos. You can get people engaged in developing these goals. You get people working on the strategy and so on. It will help them to understand these shared goals and to line up alongside them. Now, in case you have any questions as I'm going through this, feel free to drop them in the comments. Just as a reminder, I will be answering any questions at the end, but feel free to ask any questions on the way in. So we just talked about the, oops, that's not the right one. We just talked about the objectives and key results. The second one is the planning habit. What you do with this is you take the objective and key result, that goal, that thing you're trying to achieve. And by the way, if you're not using OKRs, use whatever goal system you are using, however way you want to define what you want to get done. Use this objective and key results, give it an owner, have them write a plan. Review the plan with lots of people, like that cross-functional team, and revise that plan based on those revisions, right? Now, the key to this is that this plan has to be like a short 1 page, maybe 2 pages, 3 pages at maximum, right? But the purpose of the plan is to make sure it's short enough that it's crisp and easy for people to understand, easy to read, easy to edit, easy to provide feedback on, and you as the owner are not emotionally invested in the content of the plan. If you make a 20-page plan, you're emotionally invested, so you won't take feedback. The purpose of the whole cycle is to review this with other people and take their input and integrate their input. Now, the result, so this is what it looks like. Things like this. You've got this review revise cycle. You get your team, your peers, your stakeholders, your manager, whoever it is around you. Now, you can do this wherever you are in an organization, but supposing you're one of the functional leaders, you're doing this. You collaborate with people and they ask questions. Things like, why this choice? Is there a better way? Maybe they have a better way, right? What about that dependency? Now we're starting to understand the dependencies between different areas, right? Have you considered this, right? This other idea that they've got, or this problem that they can perceive might happen here. And are we really on track? They might ask that kind of question. And as we're doing this, we're using, of course, our goals as a North Star, right? Now, we're doing this not just at the start. You write down the OKR at the start of the quarter. You're going through, you're writing some plans, but then through the whole quarter, you're reviewing this plan on a regular basis, and you're consistently and constantly engaging your colleagues, specifically your colleagues across that team, cross-functional colleagues, in understanding, is this plan still accurate? Are we doing the right thing? Do we think we're doing the right thing? Do you have any better ideas? All that sort of question. And by doing so, here's the secret, that 1-page plan and the planning habit, which is the plan plus that regular review, creates shared ownership, right? So we're breaking down silos by having a plan, reviewing it with people, taking their input and changing the plan, and that creates shared ownership, right? You do this across enough different groups, like especially across those different silos or functions, across the functions, and you'll find that the different functional leaders or different people involved in this start to really understand each other's domains. Now, they're not going to go and step on each other's toes, but they start to understand what's going on here. And now we start to have a common understanding of each other's businesses and some common shared ownership. Now, the third thing we want to do here, oops, there it is. There is the operational link or the weekly business review. This is something that I picked up from Amazon, and it's super powerful. What you do with this is you take, again, every week, you do this at the same time as your regular weekly meeting. You look at data from your customers, especially, but data about how your customer journey goes, about your critical parts of your business, whether it's costs or revenues or processing someone through that customer pipeline or whatever it is. You're looking at the data on a regular basis every week, and you're looking at customer feedback. And you're having discussions about it, like deep conversations about this. And I'll talk about how to have those conversations in a moment. And from there, you're generating actions. So this is the weekly business review. You're looking at the data. This data is, by the way, it's customer perspective, right? Data. So it's like helping you to understand what the customer sees and what the customer is perceiving, which means it's neutral. It's no longer my data in my domain. It's now neutral company data. And now we're looking at this and trying to understand, how do we better understand our business, right? How do we better improve our business, and so on across the board? And again, it's creating that cross-functional view. You're using this process, the data plus the feedback, and creating actions from this through a discussion. And this sort of, in the leadership review, you've got the teams, some key individuals, some stakeholders in there, and you're collaborating on things like, well, look, here's a number that looks strange. What do we do about it? Or this number looks unexpected, or this number looks bad. This has gone down that we didn't expect. What do we do about it? What's the root cause of this? Can we dig into this number or do some analysis to find what's really going on here? Is there a controllable input? Is there something, this number's going up and down. Why is it going up and down? Is this seasonality, or is there something we can control? And we start to do this investigation to really have a deeper understanding of this. And this is where, by the way, the different types of thinking across that leadership team from different functions comes into its own, because your engineering leader will have a different approach to data and understanding data than your marketing leader will have a different approach to your operations leader. And applying their brains to each other's domains and helping them understand cross-functionally what's going on will help get the right insights here. What's the leading indicator? Again, this is the kind of thing where we see sales going down. What's the kind of thing that would help us see this earlier? What's the number we have? And what we're doing here is we're trying to find, how do we improve the data so that this data that we have here might be missing something. Can we find something that would help us understand this earlier? How should we segment? This is one that feels very specific, but if you think about a lot of the things that you're doing in business, as you segment the customers or whatever you're doing, but usually it's customer segmentation that matters. As you segment them, you start to understand different kinds of behaviors, right? So I have one customer who has e-commerce companies as a customer, right? And all of the companies are e-commerce companies. They're in different countries, they're different sizes, but they're also in different verticals. And what's really interesting for them is when they start to segment by the vertical, like someone's in jewelry, someone's in fashion, someone's in books, someone's in electronics. As they segment by vertical, they start to get these real insights, and then their product works really well for books, works really well for electronics, but works badly for fashion. Why is that? And now they start to understand their business better, whereas previously they were only looking at size because their sales was organized by size. It seemed natural. Now, the secret for this is that customer perspective on your operational link creates shared context. As you have shared context, breaking down the silos becomes much easier, because now we're sharing our understanding of the business. Right? We have common views of how this works, and all of those things link together, right? So if you think about this, when you have this shared context, that helps you plan better. It helps you have better input to your plans, and it helps you set your next set of OKRs better. It also helps inform your strategy. Everyone gets a better idea of what's happening with the business. We have a common basis. Now we can formulate a strategy. Now, all these things are best driven from the top. I mean, it is one of those things where if you can implement these from the top level down, or across that leadership team at the same time, it works well. It works better that way. And that's what I usually do. I'm usually working with the leadership team to implement this across that leadership team. But any leader can initiate and create benefits. So if you are, say, a product leader or a finance leader or an operations leader, you could take parts of these things, invite your colleagues and your CEO and some of the reports to a meeting to discuss, for example, the plan that you have, to discuss the operational link, the WBR, the weekly business review. You could be setting up objectives and key results and asking for your colleagues to participate in supporting the same objectives and key results. They don't have to be yours and your functions alone. You could be saying, I think as a group, this is what we're trying to achieve, and here's what we would define success. Does everyone agree? And now we start to collaborate on those shared goals. We create shared goals from the bottom up. You can do that. It does work. It is easier if you have the CEO driving it, but it does work from any one person doing this. So if you're interested in this, have a chat with me later. I will be talking at the end about how I can help individuals as well. So if this was helpful, please let me know and let others know. Like, if you can let people share the news of this, I'd really appreciate it. If you comment, if you share, if you like this video, I'd appreciate that. It would make things easier for me, and it helps get the message out. If you find this useful, I'd love to know about it. If you do have questions, drop them in the comments. Right, I'd love to hear a question. If you have any, feel free to drop them in the comments, or any commentary that you have. Now, how can I help you guys? I've got a couple of things to say here. I will be going through the questions at the end. Let me just see if there's, yep, I will go through the questions at the end. So how can I help you guys work? Basically, for companies, well, all that stuff that I talked about is what I do. I can help you bust the silos. I can help you create alignment and collaboration, get clarity on strategy. What I find with a lot of organizations is that we have a strategy, but it's not very clear because we haven't actually articulated it into goals in a plan, right? And by doing so, we get it very clear, and we get a clear, consistent view. I'm often hired to help increase the speed and consistency of delivery, like how do we actually get things done faster, and how do we focus? And of course, what I do is I implement your custom OKR operating system. Now I'm going to talk about what that is and how that works in just a moment. But who do I work with generally? Typically it's C to Series D, from 30 to 1,000 employees. I do work with smaller organizations and I do work with larger organizations, and I have worked with up to Fortune 500 organizations as well. But I do find that at that scale, when I'm working with the executive team, we tend to see eye to eye and we tend to be able to communicate and get things done quickly. Most of my customers are tech-powered scale-ups, not in the technology industry, but they're using technology to drive their business model. Usually at this stage, like certainly with this kind of work that I do, it's after they've got product market fit and they're focused on scaling and execution. So if you're in the early stage of the search and you're still trying to find the right product and explore and experiment, and you've got like 10, 20 people, that's not usually my target. I do other things with people like that. But what's happening with these companies that fit this need, is they have pains, they have silos, they have misalignment, they have slow execution, conflict and resistance. What happens is there's someone who's trying to drive a particular direction, CEO is a bit frustrated. How do we get us all going in the same direction? Or how do we get us all aligned? Or how do we go faster? We seem to be going very slow. That's usually what's going on here. And at some point in time, they realize that OKRs can help, and that's when I get involved. When does this happen? It usually happens when you have pain. My belief is that there's no point doing this stuff unless you're solving a real problem. So if you don't have a real problem, don't do it. Just do this when you have a problem. Often, by pattern, this happens post-raise. We've just raised money, and that's because of Mikitani's rule. As every time a company triples in size, everything breaks. So the way you're managing breaks, the way you're delegating breaks, the way you're organized breaks, the way you set goals breaks, and so on. So you've tripled in size, you've just raised money. Now it's time to sort of like, let's try and reorganize our management system. Frequently, I'm finding companies after a reduction in force, though we've just lost a bunch of people, we've just replaced some management, whatever we've done, we've gone through a painful process, and now we have to regroup. And this is a great way of regrouping and making sure that you're making progress even with fewer people. And the third group of people that I tend to work with, or the third moment, is when organizations have tried OKRs. Now, about half my customers have tried to use OKRs. They've been frustrated with the results, and they're uncertain how to improve. So that's when they contact me and I can help them solve that. And so quite a lot of them have been in that situation, using for 2 or 3 years, feeling like it's getting slow and it's bogged down, or it's just not giving the results, or there's work and there's OKRs and it's confusing. And that's the problem that I solve. Now, who's it not fit for? Who's it going to fit like David Byrne's suit? If you're, again, I said earlier, if you're pre-product market fit or less than 20 people, most likely you have different problems. This is not usually the right solution. It's a bit more when you're bigger. A coach may help. Now I do coaching as well, but a coach, rather than having an OKR operating system, maybe it's worth getting a coach. If you've got the problem of getting 20 people aligned pre-product market fit, it's a different kind of problem to this particular problem. The other type of customer who's not a fit for is when you have different needs, and the specific needs that I've come across that people want to solve that I think this is not a great fit for. Number one is when someone decides they want OKRs everywhere. I want every group to have OKRs. I want every individual to have OKRs. My view is that doesn't work very well. And I don't know what problem you're trying to solve with that, but this isn't the right solution for that problem. Another one that tends to happen, not often explicitly, but implicitly, is that we want to automate management. We want to make it so that no one has to really think about managing people. They just set goals and magic happens. That's not going to happen. It's not going to work. What you do if you're empowering teams with, using any system, but using this system, you need better people, you need better managers, you need to be more involved. And that's why we're doing this. We're using this tool as a tool to get managers more involved, not less involved. If you want to use OKRs for performance management, like we're setting targets so that we can assess people without having to have that subjective assessment, that doesn't work. The reason it doesn't work is because you're taking all the subjectivity that you would have at the end of the quarter and putting it at the start of the quarter when you have no information. That's what you're doing. There's no reduction in subjectivity by setting OKRs. I'm happy to talk about that with anyone. If you want a big project rollout approach, like some sort of project plan with like, let's roll it out across organizations, you're probably a bank. I'm happy to help, but I don't think that my approach is going to be a fit for you. And if you've decided you want to do this because you want to be like Google, or you've read a book, I've got some great books, they are good. But if you just read the book and you want to be like that, realistically, what you need is actually a solution that works for you. So my approach is very much about developing the solution that works for you. What will we do? Well, it takes about it goes over 4 phases, covers 6 to 8 weeks. And by the end of 6 to 8 weeks, we're ready. What I do in 4 phases, first phase is review and diagnose. I interview the leaders, understand what's happening, what the real pain points are, and diagnose the actual problems. Now, this is how we customize the solution for you. by understanding what your actual problems are. The second reason I do this is because when I understand what your problems are, I can help make it stick, right? And then it actually sticks in the organization because people are motivated by their problems. And the third reason is because I develop a relationship with people, which then makes the rest of this process a whole lot easier. Second phase is training and aligning. I basically customize the OKR operating system and deliver it to you guys as a training course and align on which particular way we're going to do this in your organization to solve your problems. We then go through a phase of setting OKRs and starting the planning cycle, this planning habit, right? So this is where we really get into your business and how that's working and what you need to do. We set some OKRs and we start planning, and then we launch the execution process. And the execution is really about having that on those 5 steps, or 5 steps are on the next slide, but the full operating system, launching all of those things, making sure that it's all working really well. And overall, I usually work with the executive team. It takes about 10 to 15 hours of each person. Most of that's together. And we get this done in 6 to 8 weeks. Most of my clients want me to stay on for another quarter or so to help make sure that it's really bedded in through that quarter. But this is the core of the program. So if you're interested in this, get in contact. And what you'll get is all this. You get company OKRs and the custom operating system. And the custom operating system is 3 of those things. 2 of those things I already mentioned, which is the OKRs, the planning habit, and the operational link. We also work on the execution cadence and having kick-ass weekly meetings. We have a strategic link, which is how you check that what you're doing is still lined up with your strategy and that your strategy is still the right thing. And then the accountability at the end. And we put all this together, and that's the OKR operating system. But of course, because we've understood your business, we've customized this for you. So if you're ready for this, it's about 8 weeks. We bust the silos and collaborate, align, focus, and execute. You get clarity on strategy. Let's talk about it. Happy to take a call. meet.talktorichard.com. You can contact me like that, or just contact me on LinkedIn. It's fine as well. Feel free to drop a comment, and I'm happy to talk about how we can get started with you. I have capacity for this quarter still to kick off for Q1. Now, if you're an individual, you can't do this because this works for companies, right? This is a different kind of program. For individuals, I do 4 things, and this is quick. Leaders, if you're individual, you want coaching, I'm happy to do coaching. I do a chemistry trial session, 400 euros for an hour. Regular engagement, normally I do 6 sessions over 3 months. If you're interested in that, you've seen how I think, you've seen how I talk. My approach to coaching, I'm very much an expert coach. I'm not one of those coaches who helps you seek the answers from within. I do use those techniques, but mostly it's about helping you understand which techniques to use and helping you decide that and getting you clarity. So there's very much using my expertise, not just generic coaching. If you're interested, drop me a line or contact me on LinkedIn. In fact, actually, there's a place you can just book it on my website, richardrussell.co. Go there and you'll be able to book a session. I'm also setting up a peer coaching community. And this is something that I think is much more scalable than having me coach. It's also a lot cheaper. It's going to cost under 100 euros a month. And to join this, contact me on LinkedIn, because I would really love to understand how you would like to help develop this, like how I'd like this to develop. I've got some clear ideas. I've got some understanding of how I want to do this, but I think the real benefit here is both the act of coaching and being coached by a variety of people. And I think that if we can get a bunch of like-minded leaders in a community, I think this is going to be super valuable. So if you're interested in this, contact me on LinkedIn. I'm kicking off a Q1 bootcamp as well to set up the OKR operating system for you and your team. Now, this is something you can do individually. This will also suit smaller organizations or teams within larger organizations. It's a cohort course starting in December 23. There'll be 4 weeks plus the break over Christmas, so we've spread out a little bit. It'll cost $750. Again, contact me on LinkedIn for details. I'd love to help I'm in the process of setting that up, so I'd love to get your insight on what you're looking for to help me make sure that is awesome. And finally, I have an online self-paced course. It's on Udemy, learnokrs.com. You can go there and get a discount. It's actually even discounted from that already amazingly cheap price over there. You can see the price is $19.99. It's got some very good reviews. It takes 2 hours. You learn a whole bunch of stuff. If you want to try it, go for it, learnokrs.com. It's pretty cheap. It takes not very long. So feel free to grab that if you want, and then contact me if you want more. So if you have any questions, again, drop them in the comments. Otherwise, it's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed talking to you. I hope you found this valuable. If you have found this valuable, again, drop a thumbs up or a comment in LinkedIn, and I will get back to you when I can. But so far, I don't think I've had, unless sometimes StreamYard doesn't work very well and I miss out on questions. But okay, so far I don't think I've had any questions. Drop a question if you want. I will get back to you, or send me a LinkedIn message or anything you like. In the meantime, have a great week and scale well.